It is March, and it is fielding the 68, brought to you by Rhythm. I am Kevin Sweeney, joined today by the bracketology experts, Brad Evans, Lukas Harkins. It's going to be a fun show, guys. Conference tournament play begins tonight. As crazy as that does sound, the journey has begun to putting together those 32 automatic bids to the big dance, and in less than 2 weeks, we will have that field of 68 finalized for us on Selection Sunday. Long race to get us there, though. Lots to get through. We will recap it all Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We've added Wednesdays for the final 2 weeks. So check us out if you're looking for your bracket. Final week, excuse me. Just next week, we'll have a Wednesday show. My apologies. Either way, we will have a Wednesday in the mix. So if you're looking for that during conference championship week, stay tuned with us. But we will be busy. Plenty of stuff to get through, obviously, as things change very rapidly this time of year. And guys, Brad, I'll start with you. I mean, what changed for you this weekend, right? Obviously, leading into March, our first March weekend, it was pretty exciting, a lot of big action. What did you notice that maybe moved the needle for you?
Well, look, about a billion different things, quite honestly, and we're going to dive into this more specifically. But Tennessee is a team right now knocking the door number one seed. Some bracketologists in the business have already elevated Volunteers to that top line, usurping the Arizona Wildcats. And, it's still yet to play out. Nothing is cemented. It's not in concrete yet, but they have ample opportunity here down the stretch out South Carolina and a home matchup, but a colossal one as well against a Kentucky Wildcat. Let's say they win those two games and have a decent showing in the SEC tournament. And I think the Volunteers have every argument of being on that top seed line. So, that's just one team that really boosted the profile over the weekend. Of course, that huge win they had in Tuscaloosa against the Alabama Crimson Tide. And then how about the Zags, guys? Left for dead about a month ago. We were wondering if they were going to make the tournament. I was talking to Rob Doster off the air about 3 weeks ago, and he was pretty confident that Gonzaga wasn't going to make it. I had him as an 11 seed, and now I've got him as high as a number 9 right now. So they are firmly in, cemented, exclamation point, ending the regular season and blasting the doors out the St. Mary's Gales. So couple of teams there that really caught my eye, and then we're all still trying to figure out and the mishmash of mediocrity that is in the Big East. Who's going to be in? Who's going to be out? It's really going to play out here the last about 10 days or so as we are hurtling towards Selection Sunday.
Yeah, it was a wild weekend, and certainly Gonzaga, I think, probably helped themselves the most. Lukas, I think that's probably fair to say, just from a were you in, were you not standpoint. But I certainly think a lot of bubble teams moved one way or another over the weekend. Curious your perspective on that side of things. Who might have pushed themselves much closer to the tournament, and who will be ruining results from this past weekend come Selection Sunday?
Yeah. For one, I think it comes down to the bubble game of the weekend was Villanova Providence. That's able to be one that kind of pushes one team up and another down. Villanova picks up a big win to move pretty safely into the field for me. As far as safe goes at this time of year, whereas Providence probably falls onto the wrong side of the cut line right now. And a byproduct of that, having St. John's gets a little bit of a boost out of that for having swept Villanova. That gives them 2 extra wins over the field than you would have thought. And if you want to play the quadrant game, Villanova jumped into the top 30 of the net, meeting a home quad 1 win. For St. John's in there, another couple teams I'll toss out. Boise State, I think, has moved itself pretty much off the bubble and into really good positioning down the stretch of this season. Now more looking at what kind of single-digit seed they can get, I think, moreover than if they're going to get into the field. And Wake Forest, again, another road loss. They lost at Virginia Tech, lost by 11. It's another opportunity that they didn't accomplish on the road or away from home this season. That's really been their Achilles heel all year long. It continues to be. They're now out of road opportunities. The best they can do is add some neutral site wins at the ACC tournament, but that could be a reason they're left out on Selection Sunday, and it's a reason they can't fix anymore.
Yeah, certainly a missed opportunity for Wake, a team that I think everyone has kind of fallen in love with their style of play, their guards being phenomenal, but that road record has a chance to be pretty damaging on Selection Sunday, and they don't have, as Lukas said, opportunities to necessarily fix that. Lukas, I wanted to zoom in quickly here on that Villanova-Providence game, particularly on the Villanova side. you said to me that you felt like Villanova was now relatively safely in the field. Does that mean that they could afford to lose their next two tough games against tournament teams in Seton Hall and Creighton? Or does all of a sudden, at 17 and 14, then you're in deep trouble because of your record? How are they dancing that line right now?
Yeah, I think they'll need to take one. But I mean, as far as when you're coming into this final stretch where both of these games feel like 50-50s, at least analytically, they're both 50-50s. At Seton Hall, it's a 52% chance of victory. At home against Creighton is at 49%. They put themselves in a position where they don't need to win both 50-50 games, I think. I think they can take one of those and feel like they're in pretty decent shape heading into the Big East tournament. And obviously some of that comes down to where bid stealers lie over these last 2 weeks, but also how other teams perform down the stretch here. But I certainly think that the first one at Seton Hall is particularly important, as it's another one of those games like the Providence one where not only are they getting a win for their own bubble opportunity, but dropping down another bubble team and adding a head-to-head win over them if they're able to get that up, if they're able to win that one at Seton Hall.
Yeah, the Big East bubble has been one of the biggest storylines here so far of fielding the 68th this year. I imagine it will continue to be, but some big moves over the weekend. The Big East Championship was wrapped up over the weekend. UConn is officially Big East champs for the first time in 25 years, which is pretty remarkable considering what they've accomplished in that stretch. Multiple national championships without a Big East title. But the outright champs are the UConn Huskies. Dan Hurley off to the bars afterwards to celebrate. Good for him. That being said, did Dan Hurley find himself on the number one line again? We are going to, on this show, go through a new top 16. So just like the committee did itself a couple of weekends ago, we are going to go through the whole top 16. We will start with this block with the 1 seeds. And Purdue and UConn have been safely at the top, and they remain on the top here. So Purdue, the overall number 1 seed in the Midwest region. They will get to play through Indianapolis and Detroit in this bracket. UConn and Houston, I am told by our producer, that they were tied in our projected seed list. So they each they were tied for second overall. But again, for the purposes of this, not a huge difference. Houston would like to play through the South, UConn through the East, and then a big change. Tennessee takes over that 4th number 1 spot after that big week in the SEC. That's where I'd like to zoom in, guys. And Brad, I know you mentioned Tennessee earlier, and the big winners of the weekend. Certainly something to be said for the fact that Tennessee has essentially had more opportunities this week to build their resume than Arizona's had all conference season, and they finally took advantage. How strong a hold do you think this Tennessee spot on the top line is, in your opinion?
Right now, it's a little bit tenuous, but I tell you what, it can certainly strengthen that grip on that final number 1 seed. I have not yet promoted or elevated them off that 2 line. I have them as the highest number 2 seed on the bracket big board there at thegamingjuice.com. But again, if you knock off South Carolina there on the road, get another quarter win, 1 win under the belt, even if you lose against Kentucky and win a couple of games in the SEC tournament, I think they're going to find themselves on that top 1 seed line. As a last number 1 seed. Why? Because, look at the Pac-12. It is middling by comparison, the rough and rugged SEC. And again, you got to really harp on the fact that Arizona does have a blemish on the overall resume. That loss, of course, that quadrant 3 that came in Corvallis against the Oregon State Beavers. Yeah, they don't have any opportunities. Maybe they'll get 1, probably a max of 2 in the Pac-12 tournament to bolster the resume with another quarter 1 opportunity. But Tennessee has all the opportunity in the world of, right for the picking to be that final number 1 seed when it's all said and done. And again, just speaks to the edge that it has, an advantageous one playing in the SEC compared to the largely woeful Pac-12.
Lukas, how did you see things? Did you have Arizona up as that 4th one, or was it Tennessee?
No, I did give the edge to Tennessee this morning. I think that's come down to what Tennessee's now added in 2 more wins over the field, with wins over Auburn and Alabama. That gives them 7 wins over what's my projected field. Arizona's right now at about 4 to 5, depending on where you put Colorado and Utah. At this point, I think that gives Tennessee a bit of an edge. Another thing I'll note is in terms of metrics, net, KPI, BPI, and KenPom, Arizona and Tennessee are separated by 1 spot apiece. Give or take a direction. Acceptance strength of record, which is often one of those metrics we talk about as being among the most important. Tennessee's 4th, Arizona's 11th. It's the biggest metric gap between those two teams by far. I think that gives Tennessee just a slight edge right now, but as already discussed, it is slight. I think that they're very close right now, and there is a gap for me between that Connecticut-Houston bunch at the 2 or number 3 overall seed to Arizona, Tennessee, and maybe a North Carolina in that mix as well.
Lukas, how much does it hurt Arizona that a couple of their marquee non-conference wins, namely their 2 wins over the Big Ten, Wisconsin and Michigan State, those victories have not aged quite as well? And for a team, at least in my estimation, that hasn't gotten many big wins in Pac-12 play, they're going to really rely on this non-conference schedule. And so Wisconsin dropping 7 of 9, Michigan State winding closer to the bubble, feels like that has to hurt Arizona's case, right?
I think it does to some extent. But another thing is, if the committee stands by its reasoning as the net as a sorting tool, Michigan State's still 22nd and Wisconsin's 23rd. The quality of wins as recognized by the net is going to be significant there for Arizona. I think that's something that can still carry weight, even with those two teams struggling down the stretch. And even with them struggling down the stretch, I don't think either is in maybe Michigan State, but I really don't think either is in danger of missing the tournament. So those are 2 wins over the field still for the Wildcats.
Okay, good insight. Thank you, Lukas. Last thing on the number 1 seed conversation, I'll hit you with this, Brad. North Carolina, they were 5th in the initial top 16. We'll talk about them as we work our way down this projected top 16 today. They keep winning. 4 straight wins, found a way past NC State over the weekend, get another crack at Duke on Saturday at Cameron. How close are they to that top line?
Yeah, they're certainly in the conversation, and they're not out of the mix, to say the least. It's pending other variables to play here, and that is the outcome of games undetermined with Tennessee down the stretch. And, of course, they're going to be challenged. I mentioned at South Carolina, home against Kentucky, and we'll see what happens there in the SEC tournament. And then, of course, with Arizona and how it unfolds, for the rest of this. And hopefully, Wildcats, if you're a fan, I'm talking to you, Jeff Goodman, at UCLA, at USC, must-win situations for them to claim that top spot. And they got to probably get to the title game at a minimum, I would say, in the Pac-12 tournament to really have an argument in the committee room to be on that 1 seed line. But you look at Carolina and the nitty-gritty here, number 9 the net, number 27 in terms of overall strength of schedule. It played a rugged non-conference strength of schedule, number 24, 7-2, sterling record there in true road games, and they're 6-4 in quarter ones, which is a slightly better record. Tennessee 6-5 in that category. You got Notre Dame, obviously got to take care of business there. They should with relative ease in Chapel Hill, and then the rematch with the Dukies, baby, there in Cameron. I think it's got to be a must-win situation if they really want to, have an argument as claiming a 1 seed prospect there in the committee room on March 17th. So, yeah, still much to be determined, but the Carolina Blue there certainly not out of the conversation, the discussion for that final number 1.
Again, our consensus number 1 seeds, Purdue, UConn, and Houston, and then Tennessee jumping in on that 4th number 1 line up over Arizona. When we come back, 2 through 4, as we work our way down the seed list here on Fielding the 68.
As you guys know by now, we've partnered with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers of the Field of 68 as we all get ready for the best month of the year, March Madness. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, you can use the bonus code FIELD150 and you will get $150 in free bets on your first wager with BetMGM, regardless of whether or not you win that first bet. Here's the best part. All you need to do is deposit and bet $5 of your hard-earned money. This is how you make it work. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using the bonus code FIELD150. That's FIELD150. Deposit at least $5 and place your first wager on any game. You will receive up to $150 in bonus bets regardless of the outcome of your bet. Just make sure you use that bonus code FIELD150 when you sign up. And remember, BetMGM is now available in one wallet in select states. As a New Jersey resident, this is super convenient when I have to go cover games in Philly or New York, which happens quite a bit. When you cross state borders, you just log into your existing account and fire away. You don't have to create a new account in each state. It's easy, it's simple, and it's clean. And most importantly, we have some fun stuff coming up for the conference tournaments and for the NCAA tournament. Bet insurance tokens, college hoops odds boost, and my personal favorite, a nice little parlay boost here and there. So download the BetMGM app and sign up today.
Back on Fielding the 68, brought to you by Rhythm. I am Kevin Sweeney, joined today by the experts, Lukas, Harkins, Brad Evans. Excited to work our way down the top 16. We are working like the committee, giving you guys an updated look at those top 16 protected seeds. That is a big deal if you can stay on the top 4 seed lines. We revealed our ones already. Those were Purdue, UConn, Houston, and Tennessee jumping up onto that top line. Let's see the number 2s first here, and we lead with Arizona. We talked about Arizona and North Carolina in the last segment. 2 teams that have been in the number 1 seed conversation, seem like they will remain in that number 1 seed conversation, but jumped today, at least, by Tennessee. Then Marquette coming off that loss at Creighton. No surprise, although they will be without Tyler Kolek here this week. That could be a significant factor for them as they try to hold on to that number 2 seed. And then Kansas, off of 2 straight losses, one to BYU and one to Baylor. They stay on the 2 line as our last number 2 in the Midwest. And that's the team I really want to zoom in on, Brad, because I think it's a fascinating resume. The metrics, particularly the performance metrics, seem to be a little bit down on them, down to 17th in KenPom. I think eye test wise, you watch this Kansas team and you say they're vulnerable, but man, the wins at the top of the resume are so appealing. I mean, they have wins over 3 of the 4 1 seeds in our projected field. How do you deal with a Kansas team that is probably playing worse right now than they were earlier in the year, and how do you think they'll be seeded?
Yeah, this might be my eye test bias coming in, but I don't think they're anywhere close to being a number 2 seed, quite frankly. I got Kansas right now projected as the highest number 4 seed on the latest iteration of the bracket big board. You got to factor in McCullough's health status, and obviously went out and played very well the last game. But Bill Self has said it's going to be a touch-and-go situation with that nettlesome knee. And on top of it, too, I mean, you look and slice and dice overall resume, number 18 overall in the net. I think the biggest buoy that Kansas has, in fact, they're number 1 overall in terms of strength of schedule, number 36 in non-conference strength of schedule, but just 3-6 on the road. That's a drag on the resume, but 7-7 against quadrant 1 competition, and they do have a blemish, a blackout on the resume, a quad 3 loss at West Virginia. So the remaining at home against Kansas State in a Sunflower State rivalry should be able to take care of business in that matchup there inside Fall Gallon, and then you finish on the road at Houston at Godspeed, based on how this team has played, not shoot the ball particularly well from outside, like enormous depth. And again, McCullough's status is just really up in the air night in and night out. I think Kansas would be overseeded as a number 2. Again, I view them as a top end number 4, which means they'll land somewhere as a number 3.
Lukas, on the KU front, I think obviously the wins keep them pretty high. But I'm curious, especially given the potential comparison with Iowa State, who seems like a high 3 right now. We'll see when we reveal those. Iowa State may well finish 3 games, maybe even 4 games above Kansas in the Big 12 standings. Now, I'm sure you will tell me that conference standings don't mean anything to the committee. They're not important. But is that a challenging kind of optic play for the committee to deal with?
I think it can be challenging. For me, I will say before I get into this, I was outvoted here by her consensus. I have Iowa State on the 2 line and Kansas as my top 3. So for now, I've gone in favor of Iowa State. But I think to the point on Kansas is you're correct. They're incredible quality of top quality wins. It's including non-conference, especially Kentucky, Tennessee, UConn. Are all just terrific wins. They also beat Houston in conference play, Baylor in conference play, Texas, Oklahoma. They have a ton of really good wins. I am currently giving Iowa State that edge. Just a better overall record, 12-6 against the upper two quadrants. Kansas is 12-7 with a bad loss, which Iowa State doesn't have. If we want to get into them being really tight against each other, Iowa State does have the head-to-head win, albeit that being in Hilton where nobody wins. So that's not really particularly fair to Kansas. But for now, I think Iowa State gets that edge for me on the 2 line. I don't think there'll be too much play in terms of the conference record making a difference for either of these teams, especially because so much of Kansas's resume hinges, at least its top line seeding hinges on what are 3 truly outstanding non-conference wins, not to mention non-conference wins over Yale and Indiana, which aren't exactly poor.
Yeah, look, I think it'd be almost the ultimate test of the committee's view on the importance of scheduling strong in the non-conference. Kansas goes out, they play in Maui, they get these incredible wins, they play UConn. Meanwhile, Iowa State has become sort of the poster boy for playing the weak non-conference schedule, running it up against bad teams. I think the committee at least has a chance to make a statement here, one way or another, as to what they value, and maybe Kansas gets an edge because of that, or maybe Iowa State doesn't, and we'll see how that shakes out. I believe Iowa State will be on our 3 line, so let's get into those now. If we have that graphic, Iowa State does in fact lead our number 3 lines there in the East. Baylor also from the Big 12 in the West, Creighton and Duke. Those round out our 3 seeds here. Brad, I'm curious with Duke. I mean, I know the numbers say they've been unbelievable lately. I think since February 1st, they're the 2nd best team per T rank. Blew the doors off of Virginia on Saturday. What's the upward mobility for this Duke Blue Devils team from a seeding standpoint, especially if they can beat Carolina this weekend?
Yeah, and obviously they got a test tonight at North Carolina State. Must-win situation there if they want to, bolster their resume and try to climb a line here in the end. And, of course, the showdown there along Tobacco Road against the Heels. But let's say they make a deep run the ACC tournament. Let's say they make the title game, maybe even win the title game. I think there would be an argument. Obviously, there's other dominoes that got to fall, other variables at play with the teams around them. But they would have a shot there to climb a seed line there in the end. The drag for Duke is the fact they play in the ACC, which is just kind of a May or a mid-conference this season, and that's why the SOS is at number 75 overall. 116, nothing really scoff at, but not exactly jumping off the screen. Non-conference strength of schedule, 6-4, straight up on the road, something to tip your cap at, and then 5-3 in terms of quadrant 1 victories. But yeah, that colossal game, as it is every single year, that arch rivalry with North Carolina has even more meaning this season, really for both teams, as they want to try to ascend up another seed line.
And Lukas, you're a Big East guy. Talk me through this Creighton resume, because it feels like it has gotten much stronger here lately. Beat Marquette and UConn here in the last two and a half weeks or so. Did some decent work in the non-conference. Have had some wins that have aged better. Winning at Nebraska, I think at the time was, of course Creighton beat Nebraska. Now Nebraska's a road win against an NCAA tournament team. That means quite a bit. Iowa has gotten better down the stretch. That's a win that maybe means a little bit more today than it did, 2-3 weeks ago. What do you make of Creighton, and how high could they go?
Yeah, I think they're a resume that's kind of flown under the radar for a while, and then they pick up these home wins against Seton Hall and Marquette. They picked up a home win against UConn. I think now is starting to come to where they should have been. They haven't actually moved for me in a while. They've been on the 3 seed line for quite a bit, or at least hovering on the 3-4 for quite a bit. And I think now they're really solidifying themselves into that 3 seed spot, with this most recent week being the Seton Hall and Marquette wins, both of which by double digits. I think, to your point, though, with mentioning their non-conference, Iowa and Nebraska, perhaps not wins that have aged like off the charts well, but they're behind-the-scenes things that keep racking up in interest for Creighton, especially Nebraska being a road win where no one has really played well at Nebraska this year. I think that's one that can add extra value. Iowa's played its way close to the field. And Loyola Chicago, on a neutral site, is quietly a good win. They've rolled through a lot of their competition in the A-10 outside of a road loss to Bonaventure recently. That's one that's boosted the resume for Creighton. I think they've put themselves in a great spot. 1 game left at Villanova. I think that it's going to be difficult for Creighton to fall out of a top 4 seed, I think, for me.
Yeah, it's amazing to think if they didn't lose those 2 home games against potential NIT teams, certainly Butler and Villanova. Villanova now into the field, Butler on the short end right now, but some room to get back. You get those 2 games back at home, which obviously most teams, especially Creighton, prides itself in protecting home court. Creighton could be a 2 seed today, maybe even at least have a puncher's chance at that number 1 line. So kind of wild how things have transpired, but the Blue Jays playing their best basketball at the right time. Which is what every team wants to be heading into the NCAA tournament. Let's round it out with our 4 seeds. See who pops up here. Alabama coming off the loss against Tennessee. They stay as a 4 seed. Illinois on that 4 line after the win at Wisconsin over the weekend. Auburn, a very interesting resume. They are here on the 4 line, and then Kentucky. So an SEC-friendly 4 line. And I guess, Lukas, I'm going to start with you here with Auburn. Very unique in that they only have the 1 quadrant 1 win. Yes, that Ole Miss road win had been better. It's fallen out. It could jump back in. But I think the one team that I can remember, and you know this history far better than I do, that had a resume quite like this with the elite metrics and the poor quad 1 record was Houston a couple years ago. And that was the team that had Marcus Sasser injured. They wound up on the 5 line as like a top 5 KenPom team. Find up underseeded, go to the Elite 8. What do you make of Auburn, given a similar circumstance, although not the injury that people can use as a mitigating factor for them? How do you view this Auburn team, and does a team with 1 quad 1 win really deserve a protected seat?
Yeah, I think they're a really, really, really tough resume to deal with. They're one that I really had a hard time. I had them on the 4 line, and I had a hard time doing it. But with that said, it's not just good metrics. They're like elite metrics, 6th in net, 8th in KPI, 6th in both BPI and KenPom. That equates to like at worst a 2 seed. Another thing to go with that is, yes, they're 1-7 in quadrant 1, 1-5 in quad 1A. They don't have a single loss outside of quadrant 1. They only have 2 losses outside of quad 1A. It's a matter of they've beaten good teams. They haven't beaten great teams, and they haven't lost to anyone that's not a great team for the most part. I think that puts them in a good situation, but I could see them as low as a 6. I don't think I could see them any higher than a 4. Even though I have them on the 4 line right now, I think that's probably the seed ceiling as far as not having these quality wins goes. And it's obviously a reason the committee could use to put them lower than I think their metrics would say that they belong.
Brad, Illinois has bounced back really well from that surprising loss against Penn State. Yes, there they are, the Illini. They've that wild game, blew that big lead. Since then, beaten an Iowa team that's playing great, scored 105 points against Minnesota, and then over the weekend winning on the road in Madison. Yes, Wisconsin has struggled lately, but that's still a big-time quad 1 road win for the Fighting Illini. So take us through the resume for them and where you see them and where their ceiling could be, especially if they can pull that upset tomorrow against Purdue.
Yeah, as objectively as humanly possible, since I have a degree from that fine institution, and I will be attending in the State Farm Center the game tomorrow, and it's a mammoth one against Zach Edey and Purdue. I will say this about Illinois. They right now are fixed on the right line, projected as number 4 consensusly by our group of bracketologists here at Fielding the 68. Where could they ultimately climb? Let's say they beat Purdue. They're a bit of a trap game in Iowa City with Iowa firmly playing it on the bubble. That's a must-win situation for them. And let's say they go in and get that quadrant 1 victory. So you add 2 more quadrant 1s, the overall resume. And Illinois right now 5-5 against quadrant 1 competition, and also would bolster their overall strength of schedule, which is also a double nickel at 55 overall. So I think the ceiling for Illinois, if they win out, that includes them getting to the title game and cut down the nets in Minneapolis in the Big Ten tournament, they could be in that very back end 2 seed competition in that conversation. But if they make a deep run in the Big Ten tournament, let's say they don't win it, but make the final and then win the last 2 games, I think they're right there in the 3 seed conversation. If they split here down the stretch and maybe win a couple of games in the Big Ten tournament, I still feel they would be in the 3 seed conversation. And the downside, obviously, getting that enormous win in Madison against Wisconsin of the quadrant 1 that they added to the overall profile. I think at worst right now, you're looking at, if they lost out, probably somewhere as a 6 seed. So Illinois has got a range of outcomes. from a very low end 2 seed to the very bottom there as a number 6 seed. But take care of business against the Boilers tomorrow, and we're all partying on Green Street as a result.
And before we had to break, Lukas, just quickly, are there any teams that were very seriously in consideration for you for the top 16? I know San Diego State was a team that was selected a couple weeks ago. Haven't done anything to damage their resume really since then. Was there any team like that you were kind of 50-50 on that wound up missing the cut?
Does San Diego State kind of sound like San Diego State? Because I'll go with that. I kept San Diego State as my last 4 seed today. They've stayed in that mix. I think I was a little bit lower on San Diego State than the committee was going into the bracket preview, and since then I've tried to align with where I think that they would continue to put them, and I think that still stays. On the 4, I had Kentucky leap over them for a brief period, but now I've put San Diego State back up ahead. And speaking of a team that's already played San Diego State and beat San Diego State, BYU is kind of sneaking into 4 seed consideration. I think they're behind both San Diego State and Kentucky for me in that line for contending, but they do have that home win over San Diego State in non-conference. Recently, they just knocked off Kansas on the road, TCU at home. They have a home win over Baylor in their last 4 as well. I think if they've played themselves into consideration, the closing schedule that includes going at Hilton to face Iowa State this week, where a win there I think could really make that case. I don't think that they belong on the 4 seed yet, but a win at Iowa State I think would open some eyes to bring in more attention to the fact that BYU is a really good team that now has put together at worst a 500 record in the Big 12, which I think goes to prove some of the things that maybe are detractors from BYU teams in the past from the WCC.
Our producer weighs in. Kentucky was 16, San Diego State 17. So they were right in the mix. We'll see how things emerge there, but certainly right in the conversation are the Aztecs for that protected seed. When we come back, it's bubble talk. A lot to get to. Last 4 in, first 4 out right here on Fielding the 68.
There is nothing in sports better than the heart of the college basketball season, which is why I need to tell you guys about our partners over at Rhythm. If you're into sports betting, you need Rhythm, the place for data-backed props and picks. For those that are unfamiliar, Rhythm, spelled RITHMM, is the go-to mobile app for player props and game picks. Backed by AI predictive models, Rhythm helps you make smarter and faster betting decisions across all sports, but particularly college hoops, where there are as many as 150 games a day during conference play, many of which have softer lines at BetMGM than you'll find in the NFL or the NBA. With Rhythm, you get data-backed picks for every Division I game every day. Users get free picks daily with the ability to upgrade to unlimited access. And for those of you already using modeling, you can build custom sports betting models within the Rhythm app itself. I am a Rhythm user, and I found that I've been a better bettor when I focus on lines where my gut and Rhythm's modeling are aligned. When I think UConn can cover on the road against Butler and Rhythm backs that up, we fire. But Rhythm also helps lead you to plays that you didn't know you needed to make. Like, for example, when the data says bet the over in UMass Lowell versus New Hampshire because you have a 61% edge on that line, you bet the over and you bink. So if you want to increase your edge and win more bets, go to the link in the description below and download Rhythm today. That's RITHMM, the place for data-backed props and picks.
Took us a little longer than usual, but it is bubble time on Fielding the 68. Time to reveal the teams that just snuck in and the teams that, if the selection show were today, will be getting the bad news and seeing their seasons end in an NIT berth. I am Kevin Sweeney, joined as always by Lukas, Harkins, and Brad Evans. We are brought to you by Rhythm, and we are going through that bubble conversation. Lukas, I'm going to start with you. Take me through your last 4 in, who just made the cut in your projected field.
Yeah, so my last 4 in goes through a little bit of why the net isn't the end-all be-all. There's a 40-spot difference in the net between teams that are both in my last 4 in. So my last 4 in right now are New Mexico, Virginia, Seton Hall, and St. John's. I believe I said those out of the order. Virginia, New Mexico, Seton Hall, and St. John's is where I ended up today. teams that all have very similar kind of concepts across the board. I mean, if you look at Seton Hall's 1-7 Big East record, thanks, Diggin. Sorry, I had to throw you out there. New Mexico is put itself in a difficult spot now, under 500 against the upper two quadrants. They have a quad 3 and a quad 4 loss. They have the most consistent metrics of this group, ranking in the top 50 average across both resume metrics and quality metrics. St. John's got a lot of help. I mentioned it earlier in the show with Villanova moving into the top 30 and Villanova moving into the projected field. That gives St. John's another quadrant 1 win. It gives them 2 more wins over the field than they had entering the weekend. That's pretty big. It is the edge, I think, that gives St. John's just this last spot in the field. For the moment, Virginia's living on not having a quad 3 or 4 loss. They're 8-9 across the upper two quadrants. Not a bad quantity of quality there. Resume metrics averaging 34.5 puts them in a really good spot. And Seton Hall, 5 quadrant 1 wins, 3 of those coming in quad 1A. That's tough to leave out, especially with how well they've played over the last 2 months.
Lukas, just quickly on the Virginia front, is how the Cavs have been playing lately something that could factor in? Obviously, I think you see a lot of tweets, right? Like, get them out of there. They can't score. They stink. What are we doing? Like, the resume is still the resume, right? Like is the committee going to say that Virginia's too boring to play in the NCAA tournament?
Well, I don't think they'll say that. I mean, I do think that there is maybe something to be said for the general consensus of watching Virginia and seeing that as the response. Because it's not something that's just like the occasional media person saying, wow, Virginia is tough to watch. It's like everyone. And like if you're going to put yourself in the committee room and think that like everyone's saying that, like if the committee is thinking the same thing, the eye test can come into play with the committee too. And if a high percentage of the committee views this stretch by Virginia and losing at Duke by an enormous margin and at Virginia Tech by an enormous margin, like that could come into play, I think. I don't think it's something that necessarily should, because that's just their style of play. Like they still have a resume that I think belongs in the NCAA tournament as it stands right now. Not many teams with resume metrics at 35 and 34 get left out. Unless they have really, really poor quality metrics, which Virginia doesn't quite have. They're still sitting at 56th in BPI, which is right along the regular bubble team standard. I think that Virginia is a team that should stay on the right side, but you're not wrong. Like the way that it's been kind of a universal response to how Virginia's played is something that if you look at the percentages, the percentage of people who don't want to see Virginia in the field could be a similar percentage inside the committee room.
If nothing else, it seems like UVA would be well advised to beat Georgia Tech this week and avoid a stain on their resume.
That'd be a really good idea. Yeah, I agree.
Let's go to you, Brad. Last 4 in. What do you have?
All right, guys, I've been torn like an old sweater on some of these. I also have Seton Hall in my last 4 in, followed by Wake Forest, Providence. Again, that mishmash and mediocrity there inside the Big East. Much to play out there. And then the Colorado Buffaloes doing it for Ralphie. I got them in as my very last team in, but a very strong argument for a couple that I have on the first 4 outline. And, of course, much to be determined here in the next about 10 days or so. Really, the reason why I got Colorado in as the last team in, obviously the net there is inside the top 30. The fact they have 0 bad losses. They don't have a quad 3 or quad 4 loss. Utah can't say that. Villanova obviously can't say that. They got 3 quad 3 Ls. Iowa has a quad 3 L. St. John's also has a quadrant 3 loss. And Colorado's got a mammoth, an enormous game upcoming at Oregon. Last checked is still qualifying as a potential quadrant 1 victory if they go in Eugene and then get that second quadrant 1, which they really need to sway and maybe convince some of the minds inside the selection committee room. Then they finish at Oregon State. Zero margin for error for them here down the home stretch. But Kate, take care of business there in Oregon. Win a couple of games in the Pac-12. And I think Tad Boyle, roll Tad, will roll his way into the NCAA tournament as an at-large bid.
One thing to watch with Colorado was the Cody Williams injury. We'll see if that weighs on the committee's minds at all.
Yep.
They certainly looked better lately. He's been healthy. Maybe that swings things one way or another for the Buffs. Let's reveal our consensus last 4 in here as we work our way through. So Virginia and Seton Hall at the top. Both teams, low in the net rankings. Certainly, Seton Hall is. but both those teams in the field for now. That's St. John's and New Mexico. How about the Patino Bowl potential in the last four? And I know a lot of people would watch that if that game were in Dayton. So New Mexico staying in the field despite that loss over the weekend to Boise State. And it will certainly be interesting to see what happens with both father and son, Rick and Richard, for their hopes of going dancing. Right back to you, Brad. We've got our first four out now. Take me through who missed the cut for you.
All right, here is my list in order. We're going to start off first with the Utah Utes at the top of the list. Team very much still in contention here. Number 46 in the net, 37 overall strength of schedule. Played a challenging non-conference at number 27, 2-7, rather unsightly road record. 4-7 though in quadrant ones, and they do have the bad loss on the resume. Villanova, as I mentioned, great net metrics there. Number 26, number 23 overall strength of schedule, but 4-7 straight up on the road. 4-8 in quadrant one, but they have the three black eyes, and those quadrant three losses is going to be tough to overcome. Iowa still alive. The heart is still beating, still registering a pulse, though the number 57 in the net, not exactly sexy to say the least, but number 16 overall in terms of strength of schedule. 4-8 straight up away, 3-8 in true road, or 3-8 against quadrant one competition, I should say. They do have a Q3 loss, but they have that matchup against the ILL looming at Carver Hawkeye. And then I got the Johnnies a little bit further down there on the list, and I may move them up tonight because they've gotten some help here. And the computer metrics, they're now 5-9 against quadrant one competition, only have the one bad loss. But again, they can't have any hiccups, cannot have an ankle twist against DePaul. They should be able to bludgeon them because the Blue Demons are god-awful. And then they get Georgetown at home to finish off the regular season. Probably win one game in the Big East tournament if you get those two wins, assumingly there against the Blue Demons and the Hoyas. And I think the white suit will be coming out there in the big dance. We can only hope, and I'll order a 12-piece bucket if it does.
I will say this. The Garden will be rocking if St. John's plays what is essentially a must-win game in the Big East tournament to go dancing. And I think that would be great for college basketball overall. Hope we get to that point. Lukas, take me through yours. How does the first four out break down for you?
Yeah, so my first four out right now, I'm looking at Utah, Iowa, Wake Forest, and Colorado. Utah is still in the mix. I think they were very close to making my field over St. John's today. 4-7 against the first quadrant, 8-10 against the upper two. Just one bad loss, pretty solid metrics across the board. They're a team that's going to stay in the mix and definitely is one that could be selected today, could be among the first four out today. I think that they're right hinging on the cut line. Iowa's played itself certainly into the mix lately, up to 8-11 against the upper two quadrants. Not too bad. One loss outside of those top two quadrants. I think they've put themselves at least in position to be in position here down the stretch. Wake Forest, I still have close to the field, 25th in BPI, 21st in KenPom. I just don't see it. I really don't. I know that my job as a bracketologist is to project what the committee will do, and I think that the committee will have them close to the field. But really, I think a team that's 2-9 on the road making the field, I think would be insulting to teams that have played well away from home this year. And I think that Wake Forest hasn't done that to the extent that they need to make the field, and are out of those opportunities to win on the road yet. I think if they do make the field, that they will have passed the eye test enough to do so. But also if they make the field, there's going to be programs on the outside wondering if they should start shifting around their schedules a bit to accommodate some of that situation. And then finishing off with Colorado, another team that hasn't played very well on the road this season. They're 2-7 in true road games. Both these two teams only have one quadrant one win. Both these teams have sub 250 non-conference strength schedules. I think that puts them in difficult spots to climb over. Right now, of my first four out, the only one that I feel would have a really good odds of making the tournament right now would be Utah. They're the ones that I think really do still have work to do to get into the field.
Strong words there on Wake, but I don't necessarily disagree with you, Lukas. It would be a statement for the committee to put in a team with that poor of a record. Yes, 100%. And it's funny because the teams split their regular season, but Virginia and Wake kind of serve as an interesting kind of parallel. I think if you were the quote unquote ball watcher probably looks up and it's like, I don't know how Wake isn't a better team than Virginia. We have to put Wake in. We can't put in Virginia. But, the overall body of work, is it best or is it most deserving? I think you could make the case most deserving is what we should be operating on. And I think you can certainly make case Virginia is the more deserving team as of today. It'll be interesting to see how that discussion plays out in the committee room. Might come down to the ACC tournament results. We shall see. Let's bring it home here. Consensus first four out from our Fielding the 68 bracketologists. Starting with Utah, an interesting resume. Again, that non-conference work continuing to pay off. Meanwhile, the opposite, Iowa, the team that has surged here lately after a slow start. Providence hanging around, but on the outside looking in after that home loss against Villanova over the weekend. Get a huge opportunity coming up, though, this week against UConn. And then finally, we've got Colorado, that Buffalo's team that snuck into Brad's projected field. Still a little bit of work to do in the eyes of our total consensus, but certainly playing better and playing their way into the NCAA tournament conversation. So that's our bubble. When we come back, we're taking your questions. So head on over to the YouTube chat, drop them down below. We would love to hear anything you guys want us to talk about. We will get into it within reason, of course. This is a bracketology show. But hit us with whatever you got, and we look forward to answering your bracketology questions right here on Fielding the 68.
Big news, guys. I am thrilled to announce that we have partnered with Autograph, a company founded by the GOAT himself, Tom Brady. The Autograph fandom app gives you access to the best college hoops content, fan contests, and exclusive rewards like discounted tickets, all for doing the things that diehard fans like you already do, following your favorite team in the news and listening to podcasts just like this one. When Tom, and yes, I am calling him Tom, we're on a first-name basis these days, co-founded Autograph, he had one mission in mind: change the fan experience for the better. It works like this. You get all of your college hoops content you want in one place. You get articles from your favorite writers, pods from your favorite hosts, contests from your favorite creators, all on the feeds and the sites that you already enjoy. But instead of having to go to all these different places, it all comes to you in one spot, the Autograph fandom app. But here's the best part. The more content that you consume, the higher you rank in the app. As you consider the level up in status on the app, you can unlock unique rewards curated exclusively for you. So download the free Autograph app in the App Store and use the referral code F68, that's F68, or tap in at the link in the description below or in the podcast app of your choosing to start earning points for doing something as normal as listening to this very podcast. It really is that simple.
Bringing it home, Fielding the 68 on a Monday also marking the first day of conference tournaments. So if you want to pop over to watch some Atlantic Sun first round action after this show, I encourage you to do that. It's the best way to get a taste of March. Those games always have a little bit of juice, even if you're not sure. If you're not well versed on the Florida Gulf Coast roster, that's all right. It's still fun to watch. I am well versed, but that's because I'm a sicko, and so that's where we are. We're going to chat questions, so folks, drop them in the chat if you haven't already. But our bracketologists here, Lukas and Brad, can answer pretty much anything you guys have questions about relating to the field, bracketing, the whole thing. Wanted to start with Gonzaga, very interesting team. Obviously, we mentioned them, Brad, over the weekend, having a lot of success beating San Francisco on Thursday before our last show, and then blowing out St. Mary's on the road. How quickly and how high did Gonzaga rise for you, and how comfortable is their place in the NCAA tournament right now?
Yeah, about 2.5 weeks ago, I had them out of the projected bracket big board field. Then I ascended them to the number 11 seed spot. And then after beating St. Mary's, really in convincing fashion there in Moraga, I bowled them all the way up to a number 9 seed, believe it or not. You look at the specifics for the Zags. That gaudy net ranking of number 16 overall in the nation. Number 92, though, in the schedule, of course, being dragged down by the lackluster WCC. But number 21, as Murphy always does, and challenges his kids in non-conference strength of schedule. Now 3-5 against quarter one competition. Outstanding 8-2 in true road matchups. Also winning inside the Chase Center at San Francisco here lately, and that was also in convincing fashion. And no bad losses, no quad threes, no quad fours. It seems like the Zags going to be on a collision course with St. Mary's yet again in Las Vegas for the WCC honors, represent there in the NCAA tournament. But regardless of that outcome, if it does shake out to be that way, the Bulldogs looking very much like a single-digit seed, unfathomable that outcome really 2.5 weeks ago, but here we are.
Yeah, Lukas, just quickly on Gonzaga, I think one of the things that some of our bracketologists have said with a lot of these teams that have been hovering around the seed line, around the cut line, but also have great metrics, was that once they're in the field, they can climb very quickly. Gonzaga already had good metrics, and they blow out St. Mary's. It feels like they can rise and never look like they were a bubble team thanks to these recent results.
Yeah, I think a 9 seed might be underselling Gonzaga, and by a pretty decent margin. I gave them 6 seed, 7 seed consideration today.
Wow,
up to that 6 and 6, up to 6 and 6 against the quadrant 1 and 2. Like, you compare that to teams in the similar region, and it's not dissimilar. A ton of the Big 12 teams are 7 and 9. And Gonzaga has a big edge, being 15th in KenPom, 15th in BPI, to 25th in strength of record. I think they've put themselves in a spot where they're definitely in safe positioning going into the WCC tournament. I think that they've been the biggest victor out of what has been an absolute disaster of teams that were seeded 7 to 9 seeds over the last few weeks. Like, a ton of them have lost. A ton of these teams that we've discussed as being should be in safely in the field for weeks still are, but they're no longer looking like sure things to be 7 or 8s, and teams that are trending more towards these 9 or 10 seed lines, like a TCU, for instance, has dropped down. A Florida Atlantic has dropped down. That opens up the opportunities for teams like Gonzaga, like Boise State, to really climb up seed lines, for South Carolina, Washington State. Washington especially was that team we talked about a couple weeks ago that's really played its way up from being a bubble team to being a 6 or 7 seed. I think Gonzaga is the latest team to potentially do that. I think they're up to 8 and 2 in true road games. Obviously, some of that comes down to their strength of schedule, but that's something that's going to be a bonus. I think they're a team that's playing their way out of potentially an 8-9 game, so long as they continue to roll with the way they have been lately and play their best during the WCC tournament.
Yeah, getting out of that 8-9 game, probably good news for the top seeds, because Gonzaga playing at such a high level right now. Yeah, I don't think anyone wants to see them. If you're Purdue or you're UConn and you see your reward for, I guess Purdue already played Gonzaga, but if you're a team like that and your reward for being a top seed is playing a top 15 team based on the metrics in the second round, you're probably not going to be all that pleased. Let's work our way through the chat here. We've got a question from Adewale, who wants to know about Memphis. Lukas, I'll hit you with this one. Where do you have them after a couple of wins? Still a funky resume, obviously, but I'm not sure I've ever seen a game quite like Sunday when they were down big against UAB and wound up winning 19. Your thoughts on Memphis and their potential to play their way back into the field?
Yeah, Memphis is one of those teams. There's a few of these right now that are do X and then we'll reevaluate. I think that's where Memphis is right now. They're a team that's certainly on the outside looking in right now for me. They're beat Florida Atlantic on the road, and let's reevaluate. They're definitely still a team on my board. They're my eighth team out right now, but definitely a team that's in the mix still, and one that could make a big jump if they're able to pick up a big road win over Florida Atlantic. As it stands, their resume metrics aren't in bad shape. 45th in KPI, 54th record, puts them in a somewhat decent spot. But 3 losses in the bottom 2 quadrants, no wins in quad 1A, sub 70 quality metrics mean they still have some work to do. But work that's on the table this Saturday. There's certainly the opportunity to do that work at Florida Atlantic this weekend, and then we'll reevaluate where they belong in bubble positioning. This 4-game winning streak has really helped put them back in consideration.
Tigers always find a way to make it interesting. Still think, in my opinion, as the amateur of the group, that it'd be easiest for Memphis just to win the AAC tournament, but maybe things get interesting if they beat FAU on the road and see how the bubble shakes out. So Tigers certainly we will be watching. We got a question from Pandas. Brad, how many teams are still lingering around the cut line? Like, are you having trouble filling out that next 4 out and working your way down? How many teams are still realistically in that picture?
Yeah, Memphis is certainly one of them, but really it's like maybe a couple of teams, Memphis being one of them, maybe Ohio State, you could lump into that group as well with their late season surge. And you look at the particulars of that team, number 62 strength of schedule, number 59 overall in the net, now 3-6 in quadrant one victories. And they only have the one bad loss, a quadrant three there on the overall resume. So, we'll see what shakes out a lot of these conference tournaments, but it's obviously quite weighty with the likes of the Buckeyes and the Memphis Tigers and what they can do here with opportunity right for the picking for them to, bolster and boost the overall resume. But I will say this, usually this time of year, you're willing to list down to like maybe 2 or 3 teams that you're arguing to have those last 2 or 3 spots in the projected field. This year, I think the bubble is much larger. It's more teams in the mix overall, still fighting, scratching and clawing and trying to, add key victories to convince people in the committee room that they deserve their attention and deserve a spot in the NCAA tournament. So I can't wait for the conference season and the tournament season really to get underway, because so much is at stake for so many of these mediocre teams right now that we're all trying to dissect, whether they're in, they're out of our NCAA tournament projected field.
Yeah, Lucas, we've got a question about bid stealers here coming up in a second. But I do think it's important to know, and we've talked about this throughout the show, throughout the year on the show, I should say. Right now, the bubble is kind of artificially shrunk a little bit in our projections because we have Richmond and South Florida as teams that are in the field as automatic qualifiers. Theoretically, the widest bubble would include FAU as the American champ and Dayton as the champion in like 10. How likely it is that both of those teams win their conference tournaments? I'm sure you could play the percentages out. I think it's those are probably 30 or 40% outcomes for each team. But how does that weigh into how you view the bubble right now? The fact that there's these 2 very obvious bid stealers that are currently stealing bids, if you will, on the projected bracket as well.
Yeah, I think it's most importantly just something for fans of bubble teams to take note of. Like if you're a really big, if you're a bubble team and you think Dayton is much better than the rest of the A-10, then you can, like in your mind, take another spot and put it in the field for yourself and think about it. And the same if you're a really big fan of where Florida Atlantic is relative to the rest of the American, or maybe even some of these other teams versus like an Indiana State. If you think that they're much better than the MVC, that may or may not be a bubble steal type of league. And I think that there are still a lot of teams that's worth scoreboard watching right now. I mentioned when I was going through my first 4 out that Utah was the only team I really thought was like right on the edge going into today. But there's my list of consideration. There's still 21 teams that I have out of the field that I'm still reevaluating on a daily basis to make sure that that's a team that can't move up or down still. It's a deep list of teams that still have opportunities to move up for what is only a few spots this late in the year.
And if you are a bid stealer fan, Lucas, I imagine that you're rooting for James Madison in the Sun Belt tournament just to avoid any risk that they could steal one.
Yeah, I think James Madison is the team to watch there. I think Appalachian State has a much tougher spot to make a chance there in at-large. James Madison's certainly in the mix. They're on that 21-team list for me that I was just discussing. They're a team that can definitely get into the field. The thing that really holds back James Madison especially is they have a really, really, really poor KPI, like really poor, 96th in KPI right now. They're 39th in strength of record, but I don't know how much of 96 can be a non-starter in some capacities.
Dukes have maybe the most interesting resume. I keep saying that. I think I've said that to like 3 teams today. But JMU could potentially be a team that lost to 2 teams all season long. Appalachian State and Southern Miss, and it'd be weird for a team like that not to make the NCAA tournament, especially with a road win at Michigan State. But here we are. Nothing is decided just yet. All right, let's bring it home. Biggest games of the week. I know tonight we have Texas and Baylor. Also have that Duke NC State game. Interesting road test. Brad, any games you're looking forward to other than, of course, your Illini against Purdue this week? What are you looking forward to this week? Brackets.
Just ever so slightly looking forward to that action inside State Farm Center tomorrow. But a number of games that I could maybe would consider like play-in scenarios like Seton Hall and Villanova, for example. That's what I'm looking forward to. Wake Forest taking on Clemson upcoming this weekend. That's a standout game. Villanova then turns around after playing Seton Hall on the road. Then they get Creighton there at home. I mean, there are a number of enormous games with bubble bursting implications if you're on the wrong end of it. And we also have some seeding implications. And, I mentioned already Tennessee and the two just ginormous games that they have that they really want to plant their flag as a number one seed at South Carolina and then at home against Kentucky. You win those two games. Even if they exited stage left in round one of the SEC tournament, I think they would have a very strong argument of being a number one seed when the bracket is unveiled on Selection Sunday.
Lukas, any other games you'd flag for us to watch?
Yeah, I'm looking at Cincinnati, Oklahoma, Kansas State, Kansas, Nova, Seton Hall, Florida Atlantic, North Texas, and Colorado at Oregon as my main ones to take a peek at.
Yep.
Good list. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Brad.
One
big
second.
time pod.
One second. I'm hopping on here. We have a super chat in their YouTube chat, so I want to ask it for you guys because this guy paid money for us to ask this question. David Z wants to know, it seems Boise State is underrated. What is their seed ceiling?
Lukas, why don't you take this one?
Yeah, I really like Boise State's resume. I've already got them up to a 7 seed right now. I think they can get their way up to a 5 or 6. They've been really good on the road. 5 quadrant 1 wins. 3 of those are in quad 1A. All their metrics have played up really nicely during this stretch. They were one of those bubble teams that had a lot of landmine opportunities in a row down the stretch, and they dominated all of them. Like every single one was 20-plus point win after 20-plus point win, and that's put them up to top 40 in both quality metrics, 24th in the net. They put themselves into a pretty good spot, I think, to potentially avoid that 8-9 game. Obviously picked up a nice win this weekend to continue to build on that. I think they're trending towards a 6 or a 7 right now. I think Boise State's positioning will have a lot to do with will depend a lot on what the committee thinks is the Mountain West as a whole. So I think that's a really difficult league to determine if they're going to be a seed or 2 off across the board.
Well, Boise has 2 more big games coming up. Nevada on Tuesday at San Diego State on a big-time Friday night showdown. Finished strong here, and I think Boise's ceiling is pretty darn high. Folks, this has been fun. As I said, I am Kevin Sweeney, Lukas Harkins, Brad Evans, bringing it home on Fielding 68. We will be back on Friday, 5:30 p.m. And, of course, if you want to check out that bracket itself, head to our Fielding 68 social channels. It'll be up here in a couple of minutes. Appreciate you all joining us. See you all on Friday.